Okay, well, I started recording. Welcome everyone. My name is Nicole. I am the education manager with the Eastern Sierra Interpretive Association. Our mission at ESIA is to provide high quality interpretive products, exhibits, and programs. So big thank you to you, all of you who were able to donate or were able to become a member. It helps us put on really awesome programs such as this. Another huge thank you to Mammoth Lakes Recreation and the Measure U grant. Today we are joined by Jasper Gibson. He was born and raised in Idaho. At a young age, he has worked with major US companies such as the North Face, Mountain Hardwear, Marmot, and Smartwool, and has been published in Outdoor Magazine, National Geographic Extreme Photo of the Week, and was on redbull.com. Today, Jasper's going to talk about some of his trips and share some of his photos with us. So I will hand it off to Jasper. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Stoked to do this. As I was just saying, a little nervous, but stoked to dive in. And yeah, really appreciative to be here. So yeah, I think what Nicole and I had originally discussed was for me to share a trip that I did last spring. It was a trip that I had been dreaming about, which was in my hometown of Sandpoint, Idaho. This is where I was born and raised. Lived there till I was 18, and then, of course, went off to college and, spread my wings. But Sandpoint's always been a dear place in my heart, and this is where I grew up skiing at Schweitzer Mountain. I've been skiing there since I was 2 years old. My dad's been on ski patrol since I've been alive. He's now actually the longest standing employee at Schweitzer Mountain, the grandpa of Schweitzer, I guess you could say. And so I grew up on this. It's not a quaint little hill. It's definitely pretty big. Wouldn't say it's like the most advanced, but a good place to hone skills for going to the bigger ranges of the world. But yeah, so this is where I grew up skiing, and up until last spring, I had only ever gone this far. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, just making sure. I had only ever gone this far, which this is Big Blue. And so I grew up in like hanging out at the lift shack at the top of chair 6 here and looking out at these mountains my whole life, the mountains that extended northwards towards the Canadian border. And I'd always wondered what was out there. I'd always asked the ski patrollers like what the names were, and yeah, they've just been seared into my memory since I was a kid. And I've always wanted to go explore them. And after moving away from Sandpoint, I started to become an experienced backcountryman. In the wilds of Washington is where I started like honing my backcountry skills. And since then, I've been able to go to South America and to Chile and ski over to France and spend 5 weeks in Chamonix, like honing my ski mountaineering skills and just getting better in the backcountry. So now skiing's taking me all over the world, and something that's very dear to my heart and a big part of my life. So yeah, I dreamed up this wild trip to traverse the Selkirk Range in northern Idaho here. And last spring set off with a couple buddies, and we traversed from Schweitzer Mountain, started down here in the condos, worked our way up and across and gained the ridges, and then started our way northward and made the massive slogs all the way through all these mountains northward towards the Canadian border. Didn't touch the Canadian border because it was just on logging roads, and once we got to, this is the Canadian border here, and once we got to this point here, we decided we didn't want to slog on logging roads for another 12 miles just to touch the border. So that's where we ended up pulling out. But anyways, I'll get into the photos here. So honestly, this is, I've done big trips before. I've done like 18-day sea-kayak-supported-ski-trip and some other big backcountry style trips, but this was the first time I had led one, and it comes with its learning curves. So this is probably like the night before or 2 nights before we made our plan for where we were gonna sleep. So it was a little loose, but you know, all learning experiences, and I'll be a lot more prepared for the next one, which is actually coming up soon. So yeah, this was our loose itinerary, which ended up changing for a number of reasons, but stuck loosely to it. So this is pretty typical of the weather in North Idaho. It's very foggy very often, and we had a lot of this and a lot of inundation with snow. So, but it was so beautiful. So this is the beginning. This was in the resort still and touring out. On the left there is my buddy Kick's camp. The middle, this is my buddy Zeppelin Z-Rip, and this is Joey Sackett on the right here. And Kicks ended up bailing pretty early on for a number of reasons. This was just at the beginning of COVID, so kind of wanted to be with family, and we totally understood. This is the last lift, or this is the little blue T-bar on the way out of Schweitzer Mountain, and this is the boundary. So my buddy Zeppelin was making a film, so this was kind of like a scene, and yeah, we were just having fun too. The monocle was part of the video, which is called The Hermit. If you guys want to check it out, it's a little film from our adventure. Kind of more follows like a folk tale about the area, but also shows a bit of our traversing. Guess I'm gonna have to use this. So these are the wide, broad, subalpine peaks of the Selkirks, of the southern Selkirks. Off to this side over here is looking towards Washington and Priest Lake, which is a little further north of here. So that's looking west. And this is the Selkirk Crest just here. We did get some actual snowboarding and skiing in on this trip. A lot of people, when they think of traverses, they think that there's no actual skiing involved, which is the case a lot of times, but we factored in some rest days or some down days. They're not down days, but just like exploration days. So we were able to not only traverse the range, but spend time, more extended periods of time in these areas, because we didn't want to just blast through it. We wanted to be able to actually like see them and explore as well. This is our first night out. It ended up being an absolute blizzard that night, and kind of set the tone for the beginning of the trip. This is one of my favorite images from the trip, and I guess probably one of my favorite images that I've ever taken. Just kind of captures like the moment of what it's like to be winter camping in March in northern Idaho. And yeah, we stayed comfortable, actually, layered properly, had the right gear, but there were definitely times when morale got lower, but we'll get to that. But it was so beautiful being out in those conditions, and there's definitely a learning curve to it though as well. This is the next morning. It broke off and it was beautiful. That's Mount Casey. We had slept down in this bowl the night before, and yeah, there's a lot to be had in northern Idaho in terms of backcountry skiing, but it's fairly untapped, very untapped, I would say. Just another scenic sucker hole, as we would call it. This is continuing touring north. along the Selkirk Crest. There's Joey. Joey and I knew each other decently, but we really became really good friends on this trip, and he and I will be doing a traverse of another Idaho range come the beginning of April here. So in not too long, we'll be doing a raft-supported ski trip from the. We'll be doing a raft-supported ski trip in western Idaho on the Snake River, the Hells Canyon section of the Snake River, and then we'll ascend 7,000 feet into the Seven Devils Wilderness and do a trek there. But anyways, that'll be with Joey and my other buddy Ben Stone. So this is the second day still, and another storm rolled through. This is touring through, I think it was the burn of 97 or something of that nature, a big fire that, I think it was even older than that ripped through the area. A little while after this photo was taken, this is what it looked like off towards the east. It was very ominous, and there was lightning, cracking, and hail that actually came down, and it's wild to be in a thunder snowstorm. I don't know, I've only experienced one or two of them in my life, and like when the lightning cracks, it lights up all the snow that's flurrying down, and they're wild experiences. They don't happen too often, and from what I know, at least. So yeah, that's continuing northward. That's all the terrain we had in front of us, and this was a big day. It was a 9-mile push with like 50-pound packs, and we were trying to get to our cache, our first cache, which had a bunch of food in it. That evening, we got to the cache, and that was our view. You can actually see Lake Pend Oreille right in here, in between the clouds there. So Sandpoint lies just over here, and started to feel out there at this point. This is that next morning. We were trying to, we were going to move from that cache, so we were trying to consume as much from the cache as we could. So there's Joey putting down some Aunt Jemima. This is moving northward. That's actually me. Zeppelin took this photo, and yeah, that was a lot of the trip. so foggy, but yeah, so foggy that we couldn't even see the crest a lot of the times, which was such a bummer because it's so beautiful through there. And but it was what it was, and we were able to stick low on the eastern side of the crest and hug the lakes and the bowls, and not stick to the crest because there was school bus sized cornices, and yeah, it was just not the place to be, especially with no visibility. So we made our way along the eastern side of the crest, and we had a lot of fun while we were out there. Like, spirits were high for the most part until one of the days that became a little bit more demoralizing, but we'll get to that. These old trees out there are so beautiful. I have a series of these photos, but this is the one that I like the most. And just, yeah, the old souls of the Selkirks kind of standing guard, it seems like. Yeah, they're such beautiful old trees, and they're all over the place, just still intact. It was definitely a bit of a sufferfest sometimes. Like, you can see there's snow under his skins, and there was a lot of wet snow pretty often, so we would get pretty wet and then have to find shelter and dry off, or just keep moving so our heat would dry out our shells. But yeah, we had everything on our backs. The caches, of course, helped us out. It ended up being like 11 days, 60 something miles, and we had 2 caches along the way, so we never had more than 3 days worth of food on us. But yeah, that's my buddy Zeppelin, who's an incredible filmmaker, very inspiring cat. He's part of Protect Our Winters as well, and yeah, you'll have to check out some of his work if any of this interests you. This place was really wild. We came down from the best ski of the trip, which was down McCormick Ridge, and it was like 1,500 feet of really good snow and stable conditions, and just like beautiful tree skiing down this ridge. And then we got to the bottom, and we were trying to traverse across this basin to make it up and then to another base camp that was a little further. But we hit this creek, and then we like went around and tried to cross again, and we hit the creek again. It was just like meandering through this meadow here, it was so bewildering to see that in the middle of winter, that there was like 10 to 15 foot snowbanks that were going into this river. I don't know how it didn't freeze over. But it was so beautiful and so tranquil in this place. We ended up calling it Old Man's Hollow because of all the old man's beard that surrounded the whole place, and it just kind of had a mystique to it. It was just so beautiful, so serene in there because it was in a big bowl, and just kind of magical, really. Just no wind coming through, really, and just the snow pitter-pattering on the tent and all the trees. Just silent, so beautiful out there. This is one of the best feelings ever. After being in ski boots for 4 or 5 days, like actually getting the feet out of the boots and drying them out, and then you can see all the other gear that we were drying out. That day we got pretty drenched, and I took my sleeping pad and like laid it all out, so I had and like shaped some snow into like a lazy boy, so I was able to like kick back and just enjoy the fire and enjoy being out there with some good friends and making memories and sharing old ones. We had a layover day in Old Man's Hollow. We couldn't bring ourselves to leave because it was just so cool in there. So we ended up doing a lot of skiing that day, and without the big packs on, which was so nice to drop those 50-pound packs. We felt like we were running up the mountain at that point. This is where we hit our low. If you can't tell, my lens is pretty soaked in this. This was like the wettest day of the trip. It was super, super heavy, wet snow, and it was sticking to everything. You can see my bindings here, and there's so much snow sticking to them. So like every step, your ski ended up being like 15 or 20 pounds. And when you're taking thousands of steps a day, it really compounds, as well as like all of our backpacks were soaked and everything was soaked. And that was the most demoralizing spot. And then we were thinking that we were having like a pretty hard time navigating through this section. We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we took shelter amongst these trees for an hour, probably half an hour. No, it was like probably 45 minutes or an hour. Not that it matters. And then, I just took a reprieve, gained some energy back. And when that happened, the weather started to break a little bit, and there ended up being just this passageway through this like really steep ridge on the other side of this. And there was just this, I don't know, it's probably like 50 feet wide, a bench that just led us into the next basin, which we were so fortunate to have that, because it would have been a lot of work to get around that big cliff band otherwise. Okay, so right after this photo was taken, and this is on day 5 or day 6, we dropped down into Beehive Basin. If anybody's familiar with this area, it's a big popular hiking area in the summertime in the Selkirks. And I was in front of everybody, so I just kept going across Beehive Basin because we were going to reach another cache that another group that had actually done the same trip, which somehow it was two groups had the idea for the same trip in the same year, which this had never been done fully before. So they got it before we did, which is a little bit of a bummer, but whatever. We did it, they did it light and fast, and we did it slow and heavy. So different styles, and we spent more time out there. So it was cool, you know. I haven't actually connected with those guys, but I'm looking forward to one day and gathering their experience. But anyways, I was in front of both of these two and was cruising across the lake and trying to find the cache and then set up camp for the night because it was getting late and we wanted to make sure we wouldn't have to set up camp in the dark. And when they finally caught up to me, they had let me know that Zeppelin had broke his split board while riding down. He, you know, the split boards aren't as structural as skis when they're in ski mode. So as he was skiing down, in combination with him being like a big guy and then heavy pack and leaning back because he was like trying to ski through some trees, his board snapped right behind the heel. And that was the end of the first part of the trip for us. We made camp that night. And this was a pretty typical scene, drying out all of your gear. So we made camp that night and spent the night up there. Had our InReach device, like a GPS device, and we hit up our friends to see if they could come extract us from where we were. Luckily, we weren't too far from a service road, the Pack River Road, up there in northern Idaho. And yeah, so going off of this photo a little bit more though, when you're out there winter camping, like if you want something to dry, you sleep with it. So if your gloves are wet, if your socks are wet, if your boot liners are wet, which they always are, you end up sleeping with it. So you put it inside your sleeping bag. And then same with batteries, if for camera gear, like drones, all that, you end up sleeping with that. So your bag ends up being full of things in the evening. And I mean, it's cozy because everything, it's like a down wonderland in there. But yeah, it's pretty stinky. Very stinky, for sure. Yeah. So we woke up the next morning and it's just the snow just did not stop. Like pretty much the whole first half of this trip was inundated with snow, just completely. This is Joey looking out on all the fresh snow that's falling, but we can't keep going because we needed to get extracted. Packing up. When we got down, all of our gear was completely soaked, like to the bone. I don't know if you can see my jacket, but it's like reflective with how wet it is. And there's Zeppelin's broken split board, and my camera gear was absolutely soaked to the bone. Like, as you can see from my lens, it's totally fogged and totally saturated. And but yeah, you know, those are the ones that you remember. I'll never forget this day. And actually the descent, I mean, it wasn't as fun for them because they're snowboarders and they had to like traverse across some flat parts. But as a skier, the descent was amazing. I had like 2,000 feet of really good snow to get back down. And I have to give a big shout out to Dash Camp, Kicks Camp, Rory, Whitney, Tyler Myers, and one other. I can't remember at this point, but they were the ones that extracted us, and they were the ones that helped us throughout this entire trip, and we would not have been able to do what we did without them. So much gratitude for those guys for helping us along the way. Zeppelin needed to get some more content for the film, so this is up a little further in the range and out, because when we were scouting for this trip and setting the second cache, I had come across this couloir that we ended up skiing. but this was the camp, and I'm not going to tell you guys where this camp was because I want to keep this cooler a secret and have people go find it on their own if they want to. It's in the Selkirks. So this was our tent, and then right to the right of it here was this cave that we ended up spending the most time in that day, that evening, to get out of the snow. And it was actually a very bad idea to have a fire in there because we really got smoked out, but Zeppelin was adamant about having a fire, so we had one. But this is that cooler that I was talking about, and I don't really have any photos of us going down because I was the first one to ski it. And I think I don't know, it may have been a first descent, but hard saying. It's so close to the road that I'd be surprised if somebody didn't see it before, but it's also fairly hidden. So, and it's gorgeous. I named it Heather's Hallway as an ode to my late mother. And yeah, it was incredible in that it was the best couloir I've ever skied in my entire life. And the conditions were amazing. This was getting down from after skiing the couloir. Had to cross a creek to get back to our camp. And yeah, so that wrapped up the first part of the trip, and Zeppelin needed to get back to Jackson to take care of life stuff, but Joey ended up staying with me with intentions of exploring around the area more. And we actually had plans to extract and then go right back in, but a few days, like the day that we were supposed to go in, Joey got a call that one of his friends had died in an avalanche in Jackson. So we took a couple days. He took a couple days to mourn and get in touch. But a few days after that, we decided we wanted to go back out. So Joey and I went back out to complete what we had set out to do in the first place, and to complete the traverse, which I'm so glad that he was keen to do it because it's been a dream of mine for as long as I can remember. And so yeah, the second part of the trip commenced. We took off from where we left and kept on trucking. This was the first camp for the second part of the trip. Oops. This was a nightly occurrence, sitting in the tent, checking out the route for the next day, plotting and planning and figuring out what the next moves were, like what ridges we were going to take, what we wanted to avoid, what we wanted to see, what we wanted to ski. It's a lot of teamwork and a lot of navigation skills, communication, just knowledge of the mountains. And yeah, Joey and I work really well together, and excited for a lot more adventures with that kid. This is a pretty common scene in the mornings. Like, we would build shelves right outside the tent so we could just be in our sleeping bags still and make tea and coffee and all that. So that's what that is. That's looking back. So finally, the second part of the trip, we got good weather and could finally see. And that was everything that we traversed thus far. So right there, if you can see, that's a very prominent feature in the Selkirks in northern Idaho there, called Chimney Rock. It's got some climbs on it, and that's pretty iconic. And then this is the Seven Sisters area of the Selkirks, and we skirted along the eastern side of it here. I think took this passage here, but yeah, so kept on cruising. We came upon this cabin that is left open during the winter time for snowmobilers and skiers, and I mean probably a lot more snowmobilers than skiers out there. But yeah, it was really cool. Nice little stop off, little reprieve during the day. And this, at this point, this I guess would be considered like day 8 or 9. Looks like spring. I guess it was kind of spring. It was getting to be April, but yeah, this is the view from one of our camps. super beautiful, just really out there at that point. Like pretty far out there. It would have been hard to get to us if something had happened. Oh no, that's not supposed to be there yet. But this is one of our camps there. Shout out to Big Agnes for supporting us on this trip. That was huge to have their tents and sleeping bags and puffies, big puffy jackets, which kept us warm and comfortable the whole time. It's a pretty expansive view of the range. This is the west, the east, and all that there is to offer out there in the Selkirks. It's very untapped. Not that many people get out there to ski, and there's a lot of potential. This is kind of wild. We didn't know how we were going to get out of here, but then there ended up just being this passageway, this like ramp that took us down to these roads down here, which you can see with this, which this is the Smith Creek drainage. And yeah, it just so happened that these big cliff walls gave way to this ramp that led us down there, and ended up being some fairly hellacious skiing to try to get down to the road level and river level down there. It was like a foot of corn snow, which is like unconsolidated, like granular snow, and it was very steep in there, and it was just really treed as well. So, and we were trying to make as much progress down valley as we could, and but it was very unstable. So like you would be skiing across these and weaving through trees with big packs on, and the snow would just be sloughing under your feet. And like, luckily there wasn't big enough areas for it to avalanche, but had there been like a glade or anything like that, there definitely would have been some avalanches. But just because of how many anchors there were with the trees, like we just got lucky and had to make it through that terrain and stay in close contact with each other and make sure both of each other were safe. Here's Joey. After we did that, we were pretty exhausted, but happy to be down on the Smith Creek Road, making our way towards getting out. And right after this photo was taken, we spent the night near Smith Creek, and it was a pretty interesting night. We heard a lot of, while we were going down the road, we saw moose tracks, cougar tracks, and bear tracks because it was spring. So we were definitely on edge. And then that night we heard some sounds out there that I have no clue what they came from, but we were very scared. We were knocking pots and pans together and screaming like schoolgirls to make sure that the creatures didn't come get us. We're still around today. So that was the aftermath of Joey's feet from the traverse. And yeah, this is when all of our support squad came and picked us up. And yeah, we were so lucky for those guys. They helped us out so much, and they extracted us from up there near Bonner's Ferry. So we traversed from Sandpoint, pretty much Schweitzer Mountain, all the way up to just as the crow flies, probably like 8 miles shy of the Canadian border. And it was a trip of a lifetime. It was so cool to explore the mountains that were out the lift shack window my entire life, the mountains that I had been looking at since I was a tyke. And glad to have had such good people to do it with as well. So that was a wrap on that. Job well done. And yeah, so that's that. I guess I can go into what I've been doing recently. Recently, I was my photo career has seemed to have hit a tipping point, and things are now flowing more than ever before. I was recently down in Mexico and did a shoot down there for a brand called Chums. They make like eyewear retainers and things like that. But that was just a small snippet of what I was doing down there. I went down to learn Spanish and heal up from shoulder surgery. Actually, I had shoulder surgery in October and went and didn't want to be around skiing because all my roommates were going to be skiing, so didn't want to be around that. So went down. I had some money saved up from working all summer and met some people down there who are professional surfers and got connected with them. And I'll actually be going back down to Mexico pretty soon for a shoot with those guys. So I was in Mexico for 5 weeks, and while I was down there, I got a call from my really good buddy that they needed a photographer up in Alaska for a shoot for marketing material for Epson printers and National Geographic. So figured I couldn't turn that one down, and I had a 24-hour turnaround. It was 72 hours of traveling, 24-hour turnaround in Salt Lake City to ditch my board shorts and grab all my cold weather gear. And are you guys able to still hear me? It said my internet connection was unstable. Okay. And yeah, I made it up to Alaska and had a couple days shoot up there. And yeah, it was amazing. Kind of saw like maybe a big part of my future up in Alaska, trying to go explore new places up there or explore places that have already been explored but new to me. And that shoot went really well, it was successful, and yeah, now I'm as busy as I've ever been with photography, and things seem to be flowing with it. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Let's see here. If you guys want to see a little bit of video from that Selkirk Traverse, Joey actually makes these funny little snippet videos, so I'll play one of those. Because I'm going to have a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm going to smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm going to kiss that pretty girl on the tune to her. Yeah, this old man is going to town. Yeah, this old man is going to town. So not long after that trip, Joey and I did another trip in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. Just more of a base camp trip, but did a lot more skiing out there. You don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. Now you played it. Played it right. So we like to have fun while we're out there. Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much all I had. If you guys want to open it up to questions at all, I think that's what happens next.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, they can throw them in the chat or unmute themselves, whatever works. And if you want to You can keep sharing your screen or turn it off. It's up to you. Oh, perfect. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions for Jasper or on his trips or what he's up to next, maybe that's a good
No
question.
worries.
What's up to
What's that?
what's next?
Oh man, I have a shoot and visit in Idaho for Visit Idaho coming up next week, early next week. Shooting snowmobiling around the area, and I'll come back to Salt Lake next week and have another shoot around here for a supplement company, and back to Mexico for 2 weeks for some shoots, and out to my cousin's wedding in Virginia, and then back to Idaho for another 2-week expedition. So yeah, kind of busy till mid-April at this point, where hopefully after that I can just decompress for a while and pour over all the images that I will have taken over the last couple months. I'll have tens of thousands of images to go over. So I'll be doing a website update and yeah, just like hopefully just decompressing a little bit from all the traveling.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any questions? Should we let Jasper go? Oh, they all popped up at once. So where would you like to shoot if you had the chance?
Oh man, I want to go to the Middle East more than any place else in the world, I would say. The Karakoram and specifically, so in Pakistan, the mountains in Pakistan. That's like the place, yeah, that's highest on the bucket list for me.
Nice. Another question is, what's your favorite ski boot, binding, and ski for a small tour?
I don't have too much experience with different ski boots. Dalbello is the brand that I use. They've been great for ski touring, and they have really good downhill performance. So that's what I use. Binding, since I'm a light guy, I prefer Dynafits because they're really light and they're bomber. They're really good, really strong bindings for uh, light for the uphill and strong for the downhill. And then skis, I like a more playful ski, so I ride Armada skis. But they're all honestly, when I'm like skiing couloirs or skiing hard, like heavier snow, they're a little bit too floppy. So I'm looking into trying to find like a stiffer ski for when I'm charging harder.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jasper, so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Very cool pictures. Oh, yeah. Thank you for the great presentation, great images. Yeah. Thank you, Jasper. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back one more time. Next week's our last week, and we'll be joined by Rick Says. So we'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Cheers.
Jasper.